Hi everyone, I'm Paul Lefevre, the Xojo Developer Evangelist, and today's webinar we're going to cover a couple things. Main topic, of course, is the ListBox. It's what so many of you are here to listen about. Oh yes, and there's a comment here. It says Jeff Pearlman is talking. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me, Paul Lefevre. Apparently, I need to tweak the settings on our GoToWebinar page. Sorry about that. I can't mimic Jeff Pearlman's speaking voice, so sorry. But nonetheless, it is me. And today we're going to be talking about the brand new Xojo 2013 R3 that was released earlier this morning, my time anyway. And so if you haven't already, you want to download it. And there's a few links here. We do have a couple glitches with a couple of the installers that we're working on getting corrected, so I'll just point them out to those of you that are here. First of all, the multilingual Mac installer is not properly code signed, so you'll get an error if you try to install that on newer versions of OS 10 unless you turn off Gatekeeper. The English one is fine, so you can just jump ahead to the English one. And I think the Red Hat English link is not working at the moment, and we got a mismatch between what the website is linking to based on what's on the server, so we're going to get that updated as well. Other than that, you should be good to go. And I'll just click here so you can see if you want to see what's new in Release 3, and there are a lot of things that are new, you can always just check out the release notes. And one way to do that is you go to the docs wiki, docs.xojo.com. You can always click New Features and Changes. And this brings up the release notes page for releases that go back years. The Xojo ones are always up here at the top. And you can see the list of items. Release 3 has a tremendous amount of bug fixes for you to go through and review, particularly around the IDE itself, as you can see. And a few other areas, Cocoa, Web, Windows stuff. And there's some new stuff as well in the new section, and I think the change section and then the documentation changes are also highlighted. So there's a lot of stuff that changed in Release 3, so it's definitely worth pulling down and checking it out. And a couple things I will point out before we jump into the ListBox stuff is, well, we can just run our ListBox example here so you can see one of the main changes is the debugger now appears, so you can see right here, in its own easily accessible tab instead of embedded here within the navigator that sometimes made it a little hard for people to find. So now it's always in its own tab, and you can easily have access to the debugger when it's paused and look at your variables in the stack and the code and whatnot. Other things this can do for people with smaller screens is you can actually hide the toolbar now, which a lot of people on laptops were asking for. And you can shrink these things to be a lot smaller than you could before. Also another common request for people that had laptops. But like I said, spend some time going through the release notes, checking out what's new. A lot of good stuff there. This release is the best one of Xojo yet, and we're going to use it as we go through the ListBox examples today. So let's see here. We got a lot of people here for the ListBox one. So I have right now 3 examples we're going to go through, and I'll certainly take any questions that you can dream up while I'm talking. Feel free to type them into the little question box. I see what comes through there, and if I can address it, I will. So we'll start with this ListBox example here, which covers a wide variety of things a ListBox can do from a standard perspective and when it's hierarchical, which is kind of like a tree list. So let's just run this so you can see some of the stuff that this example does, and then we'll look at some of the code that can do it. So here's the example here, and there's some options here for row highlight. I don't know if you can see it on your screens, but the rows are highlighted a very lightish color here, and then white and another color. I guess it's kind of bluish. And if I check the box, you can see the highlight goes away and it's just everything's white. You see as I move the mouse cursor over the rows here on the corner, it's showing me the coordinates. I can click on individual things and what's selected is displayed up here. I can drag to reorder items. I can click on headings to sort. You can see this is sorting in alphabetical order. I can sort the number column and you can see this is sorting numerically. I can click in the editable cell and type in a value. And then what was typed when I press return shows you right down here at the bottom. This field has a pop-up menu that I can change the value, and then it draws the color you selected as a graphic right in the column right next to it. And then there's this checkbox column here that you can see indicates whether or not it was checked. And yes, the coordinates that show up here are the row and column that the mouse is over. So you see it starts at 0, row 0, column 0 in the left and goes out here to row 9, column 5. And all right, let me just see here. There's a question about disabling highlighting color. Yes, I actually have a second example that we'll go through after we go through this one on how to handle the highlight colors yourself and to just highlight individual cells as you're clicking on them. So you can see this is just the standard stuff. Oh, I didn't show the dragging. So I can grab a row here and you can see as I can drag it up here to this area, and you can see when I get the mouse into the area, the text changes to say it's ready to drop it. And then when I let go, it will display the text of the row that I dropped on that particular droppable area. So that's a bunch of stuff that the ListBox can do right there. So let's take a look at some of the code for how to do some of these things. And we'll probably start with just looking at the events, because that's where a lot of the magic of the ListBox starts to come into being. I'm going to make that a little bigger so I can see all the names. All right, so you can see I've implemented quite a few events on the ListBox. There's probably a few others that I didn't implement, but ListBox has a lot of events. And I think, as I've maybe mentioned in the forum or maybe even the description for this thing, the ListBox is easily the largest and most powerful control that's included with Xojo. So it can do a heck of a lot. And this is only just, tip of the iceberg kind of stuff, but it's common stuff that people ask about. So cell background paint is an event that's called that would draw on the background of each individual cell in the list box. So here you can control things that get displayed. And in particular, I'm using it here to do the alternate row highlighting. And there's not anything really fancy in here. It's simply just checking if we're on an even numbered row, and we've checked the box that says display the alternate highlighting. And if both of those are true, then we're doing a slightly tweaked for color, and then we're just filling the entire graphical area that's supplied to this event handler with that color. And because we're not checking the row or the column, it's doing it for the entire row, which gives the effect of having a background color in the row. So it's pretty straightforward and simple. But this is a common thing that people love to see, and it's actually built into the web list box. So this is how you do pretty much the equivalent thing on desktop, just a few lines of code. And a lot of the stuff you see here, you might find that you want to reuse in a lot of your projects. And that's where it makes sense that you create yourself a listbox subclass in your project and start to add these things that you want in all your list boxes in your own apps, so that you drag onto your windows your own custom list box, rather than start with the default empty one every time and add this stuff back into it. So the background paint, 4 lines of code here, that's what it does. All right, I'm trying to think of the best way to go through what some of these are doing here. I guess I'll hit the easy ones first. I didn't show this one. The double click event is just called when you double click on a row. And you can see I'm not doing anything terribly fancy here. But people sometimes forget that there is an event handler for that. But yeah, it's right there. Unfortunately, the event handler does not tell you as a parameter into it the row that you clicked, like some of the other click ones do. But you can get that easily enough by checking list index, because when you double click on a row, it will by default become the selected row and thus be what's in the list index. So that one's pretty straightforward. Let's just check the open event handler so we can see some of the setup stuff that's happening here. All right, so this is just the setup that's adding the default data you saw in the demo when we ran it, and we just get some simple text that we've thrown in an array here. We're adding in a row for each of them, putting in a random number for the number column. The editable cell just has some text here. But these two here are important things to note. Columns 3 and 4 have the well, let's just count so we can see here. Remember, we're starting at 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's these two here we're talking about, pop-up menu and the graphic. And I'm setting those to have an empty string, which makes sure that particular events get called. If you just kind of ignored them and left them empty, if you will, you'd notice that the event isn't called, which means you're not able to do some of the things you want to do. So just setting them to blank makes sure that things work how you want. And then down here is where I'm setting the specific types for certain columns. So the number column I'm displaying centered. Let's see here. The editable one is set to be an editable type. And then the last column is set as a checkbox. And these are done for the entire column, but there is, I believe there's also a cell type, and you can set these things cell by cell if you needed to. But for this purposes, it makes sense to just have the entire column be the same thing. So this is just setup stuff that happens here. All right. Let's run the demo again, because I see a couple of event handlers here I didn't show in the demo. I want to see here if I click on something there. I want to see what happens when I press a key here. So I have a, yes, I just pressed the letter N, and then I press, so I've implemented a kind of a little search thing where if you press the first letter, it jumps to the first row that has the letter in that particular column. And you can see that in the key down event handler. And again, there's not a lot that's super sophisticated from a code perspective. It's just knowing which event handlers to use and how to use them. So this is the key down for the entire list box. So it's checking, you know, what key was pressed, and then it's just going through and making sure that all the rows are not selected, and then it's checking the particular, I'm checking the first cell, or the first column, if you will, and I'm checking the first character to see if it matches the key that was selected, and if it is, I'll highlight it. But that's the sort of stuff that you can put in, you know, just a neat little feature that people might expect or find useful in your apps. All right, let's see. We got mouse down and mouse move. This is the one that's showing the row and column as the cursor is moving around over the list box. This event gets called repeatedly as the mouse cursor moves around. It supplies the X and Y coordinates, which are just the point or the pixel coordinates. And this is using these two useful methods right here, row from XY and column from XY. And you just supply in the pixel coordinates, and you get back the actual row and column that the mouse is hovering over. And that can be very, very handy. And in this particular case, we're just displaying it in the corner so that you can see what cell you're actually hovering over. But that's how you use these two methods. All right, the pop-up menu, when we run this again here, you see have a little menu here that appears. Now, this is not actually a pop-up menu control that's sitting in this cell. The list box does not allow you to embed controls within the individual cells. But you can often simulate what you want using a combination of events. This particular thing is a simulation. It's drawing a little triangle. So this is actually a graphic that's drawn. And you can see I could probably do to offset that a little lower rather than drawing that so high at the top. But it's just drawn on there. And the text is just the text. and also drawn on there. And then it checks when you click, and it determines that you clicked in this particular column, and then it displays a menu. So it creates a menu and it displays it using the pop-up method. And then it's able to check the result of the menu, and then it changes the appropriate things based on what you need to do. So let me just see here. All right, first of all, this is the way I have this is the mouse down is just verifying that you clicked in column 3. And if you did, it's returning true. And that allows the mouse up event handler to be called. If you don't return true from the mouse down, the mouse up event handler doesn't get called. And then here again, we're checking to see if we're only dealing with column 3, because that's the one that has our fake pop-up menu, if you will. And this is where the menu is actually created. So you see you're just creating a menu item, appending a bunch of stuff to it, using the pop-up method to display the menu, and then checking the result for what was picked, updating information, updating the text field. So that's how the pop-up menu itself works. There's a little bit else that's hooked up with it here. So let's see, I think install text paint. And you can start to see here a little bit more stuff. First of all, we have quite a bit more code in here than the other ones, because we're checking for each column to see what we want to paint or draw based on the specific column. So column 3 is actually the pop-up menu column. So that's where the triangle is drawn, and also the text. And you can see the text I'm actually storing in the cell tag, which isn't a visible field, but it's a great way to store behind the scenes information that you want to use for some other purpose. And in this particular case, I'm using that as the name of the color that was selected so that I can draw it right there within the cell. Column 4 is the column that's right next to the pop-up. It's actually the little box that shows what color you selected. And this is just checking the color that's in the cell tag, so it's being used here as well. And we just get a case on it, and we set the color to whatever we want based on what was selected from the menu. So these are the menu values, and we set the color for cell 4, and then we just fill a rectangle that fills most of the area of that particular cell with a tiny little border. So that code right there is what does something like what you see here. So that does all these things. We pick green. The one part of that select case displays the word green here. The other part is what's checking is green here. All right, let's fill this area with a rectangle that's in the shade of green that we want. Easy as pie. All right, let's look. I quit it too soon. Let's. One common thing that people bring up with the list box is the sorting. Normally, when you click the heading and you have the sorting enabled, things are sorted alphabetically. So you can see E, and then the T's are at the bottom. That makes sense. Doesn't make much sense when you're sorting numbers, though. Alphabetically would mean that the first number we'd see in this list would be 182. But 182 is not the smallest number. 77 is. So particularly becomes a problem when your numbers don't match up. But this sort, you can see, is sorting properly. 77 is first, not 182. And so how is it doing that? Well, surprise, surprise, is another event. And this event is the compare rows event. And the one that is doing the handling the number column is column 1. So again, there's a select case here to check which column, because I actually implemented sorting on 2 other things that may not make as much sense to sort, but the pop-up menu column and the checkbox column. You can sort whatever you want, however you want. And if you want to sort numerically, you just have to take the value that's in the cell, convert it to a number, and then do the comparison yourself, and then return one of these 3 values to indicate if it's less than, greater than, or the same as the other value. And it's providing as inputs here all the values you need, the first row and the second row that contain the 2 things that are being compared, and the specific column that's being compared. So this is just comparing and the rows that are being selected are all handled behind the scenes when it's doing its sorted algorithm. You don't need to necessarily know what two rows are selected. You just need to know you have two values. Is one greater than the other, or are they the same? And you compare them. You return -1 if row 1's less than row 2, 1 if it's greater, and 0 if they're the same. And that allows it to sort numerically. And you can implement this stuff to sort, however you want, crazy sorting. And you can see here, I'm sorting it on the list box or on the checkbox side. If it is actually, the comment here helps me out so I can read the comment. I'm sorting the checked cells higher than the unchecked cells. And I don't even know if that's the default or offhand. I don't even remember what happens if you don't specify a sort for checkbox. But I thought, well, I want to see my checked items sort at the top. So that's what I'm going to implement. So now when you come here and, well, I got to check something first. So if I do a descending sort, the checkboxes are considered higher value than the unchecked ones, which might make sense. These you might consider to have a value of 0 and these have a value of 1. So you get them grouped that way. But it gives you complete control over how you want to do that. All right, yeah, let's see. I didn't show the contextual menu. There's one question here. It says, can an example of this ListBox project be made available? Yes, it will absolutely be made available. It actually was intended to be in R3, but didn't quite make it. But it is on the downloads that are available for all the examples, and I'll also put it on the webinar page as well. If I right-click here, you can see we've got a contextual menu. It has two options. So here I just right-clicked on 4. I can click Add New Row. I get a new row that shows up at the bottom. I could right-click on it and hit Remove and get rid of it. I could remove an existing one. And that's all implemented using the construct contextual menu and the contextual menu action events. And the construct one is where the menu is constructed. So you get a base menu to append all your menu items to. And you get, again, the X and Y coordinates of where the contextual menu was introduced. And then here, we can just make sure that it was done on an actual row. And then we just append. Actually, this one is always adding the new row, and this one is making sure that you're actually over a row to remove. So you can see that I imagine if I right-click down here, yes, you can see that I only get the one item instead of, there's no remove row because I don't actually have a row that I'm over, a row with data anyway. So that allows you to have a little bit of flexibility there. And an important thing to note, and you'll see in a lot of these, as you click through them, and you want to make sure you refer to the language reference, but a fair amount of these, you want to return a value if they have a value, if they have a Boolean value. Often you want to return true, and that usually indicates that you're overriding the default ListBox behavior. And as we'll see in one of the other example projects, returning true is key for if you want to override the default selection that you see when you're clicking around in rows. So often you want to check your return value. Because if you leave a return value off of an event handler or even a method that has a Boolean as its return result, well, it's going to return false by default because the default of a Boolean is false. So often you need to specifically return true to override default behaviors. So it just creates the menu. And then this event is called when you actually pick something from the menu. And here it's just, if you picked add new row, it's adding a row, and it's using the add row method, which always adds a new row to the end of the list box. There's also insert row methods. You could insert it between two lines. And I could have used that here so that I checked where the right click happened, and I could have had insert row, and I could have stuck a row right in between if I had that desire. And then the remove row is also making sure that it's removing a row that exists. So if you attempt to access rows that don't exist, you're going to get an exception. You're going to get the out of bounds exception. All right, cell click. This one's pretty simple. It's checking if we clicked in column 2, and then it's calling the edit cell method for the row we're on and the column, and then it immediately returns true. And the edit cell method makes the cell inline editable. So that's what you get to see when I'm clicking in here. It's editable. I can come in here and type, do whatever I want. But if I click on this one, it's not editable because I'm not making it editable. It's just clickable. But this one, I am immediately making it editable. And it becomes uneditable when you press return, when you tab out of it, or when you click elsewhere on something that's not editable. So that's how that works. And inline editing is pretty useful. People often like to just go into the data that they're looking at and immediately make a change. So inline editing can often be a great feature to add to your app. And that's how you turn that on. And then the cell action event handler is called when the editing finishes. So that means, they pressed return, they tabbed out, it did whatever. So in this particular case, I'm checking if we just finished editing the editable column, which would be column 2, and that this is just displaying the new value that was edited there. And that's how you would get the change. So if this list box happened to be like hooked up to a database or something like that, you would make the field editable. People could type in a new value, whatever it is, a name or who knows what. And then in the cell action event, you'd be able to check what they just typed. And then you could either save it, or you could immediately update the database with it, or you could do whatever you want. But that's how those two interact. All right, I'm just checking a couple questions here so I don't end up with too many. The question is, can we align center the checkboxes? Well, you can write the code, but I'm pretty sure the checkboxes don't center themselves. They're always left adjusted, which is kind of annoying. I'm pretty sure that restriction is still in place. We can test that real quick. Checkboxes are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, column 5. So if I go, I should have just came here first. So let's align 5 to be, let's see if that aligns the checkboxes. Somehow, I doubt it. No change. So there you go. Unfortunately, no, the checkboxes seem to be ignoring alignment. I have no idea if that's a bug or if that's just always how it's been. But nonetheless, that's how it is now. So we'll comment that out since it doesn't really do anything. All right, there's a question here about changing the header, and I'll probably get back to that one because the gist of it is no, there's not really great ways to be monkeying around with the header. All these things pretty much are for dealing with the data that's in the list box and not the headers themselves. All right, so let's see. We've hit up cell action. There was a couple other things here. Cell action is also called when the checkbox value changes, since we were briefly just talking about checkboxes. So when the user clicks in the checkbox to check the value or uncheck the value, the cell action is called. And here again, it's just checking that that's the checkbox column, and it's checking if it's checked, and it's updating the text field. And again, that's how you can use that for fast inline editing. All right, we already looked at that one, and cell text paint. We covered this one and the drawing of all the various text. The change event handler does not have a lot in here, but this is an important one and probably the one you would use most often with any list box. This is one that's called when you pick a new row of the list box and the user clicks on a row or uses a cursor to move through the row or whatnot. And you don't get any parameters or anything like that, but you at least know that, hey, the row has been changed. And you can use the list index and probably other properties to figure out what you want to do. So in this particular case, I'm just checking to make sure that a row is actually selected. And if so, it's saying which row was selected and some of the text. And if it turns out a row is not selected, and list index returns -1 if no rows are selected, because all the rows are counted starting at 0 up to whatever the list count is, -1. And if there's no row selected, we just display nothing selected. We looked at the compare and the construct and then double click. Let's look at the dragging. And you can go back to that example here. And you can see the dragging. I just clicked on the row, and now I'm dragging it around. And then when I get here, magic text changes. So I'm going over here to the inspector. You can see there's a property here called enabled drag and enabled drag reorder. Drag reorder is the thing that allowed me to drag and reorder the rows in the list box. But enable drag is the one you would turn on to be able to drag a row out of the list box, essentially. So you have to first turn that property on. And then in the drag row event handler, you can specify what it is that you actually want to drag. Because the list box is showing all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's primarily showing text, but this particular example also has what looks like a fake pop-up menu, and it also has a column that's showing a color, essentially. And there's multiple columns. So which one do you actually want to show in the drag? You gotta kind of make that decision. I've decided that I'm just going to show in the drag or make what's available just what's in the first column. The text is in the first column. And then the drag label is the one that can receive the drag. So you can see here on its open event, I've told it that it can accept a text drop. And since I've set in my drag row, I'm pretty much just assigning the text. That means the text that I've assigned here is allowed to be dragged on the drag label. It won't be allowed to be dragged elsewhere because none of the other things are set to accept drag. So I can't drag it on this label. Nothing's going to happen. I can't drag it up here because I haven't told it to accept drops on those things. So this is accepting a drop. And then there's just some drag-related event handlers that you can use. So the drag over indicates that you're, on top of the control and you're ready to drop something on it. So you can see here it's checking if there's actually text and it's changing the caption of that label. If it's actually dropped, it's again making sure there's text there, and then it's changing the caption of the label to what was dropped on it. And if you move outside of it after dragging, it's reminding you that you can drag something there. So that's how you can drag things around. And you can actually implement the ability to drag between list boxes. So you could have two list boxes, and you could do this same technique to drag a row from one list box to the other, and then drag them back and forth. You would essentially create a new row in the second list box that you drag to and remove the row that you dragged from the first list box. It's all pretty straightforward, but you do have to set it up yourself using these event handlers. Follow-up column here. Is there an easy way to put a combo box or pop-up menu in a cell? Well, you can't, like I mentioned before, you can't put controls in cells. You can fake things. And what this example does is it's faking a pop-up menu, essentially, in that manner. I imagine you could probably fake a combo box as well by making this editable and then allowing the typing in it. If they click, say, in one part, and if they click near the edge, you could display the menu. And you can check that using the X and Y coordinates that come through the event handlers. In this particular one, the cell click would have X and Y coordinates, so you could decide what to do there. All right. And that covers most of these here for the standard one. I want to check the time. All right, we're going to move on to the hierarchical one. We can see what this looks like. So a hierarchical list box, has kind of a tree view. You can expand and hide children. Pretty straightforward. It's a little tricky to work with Xojo because the data that's in the child doesn't really exist anywhere once you close the node. So when I close this, those rows are now gone. So they don't exist anymore. So each time you expand this, you get an event handler you can call, and then you have to add these back. So when you're dealing with trees, you generally have to maintain your data, elsewhere so that you can put it back in the appropriate thing. I can click Add Folder button here to get a new folder at the sublevel. I have the code set up to just automatically add children to any folder that's added. And you can keep going, as many levels as you want that makes sense for your app. You have to be careful with too much nesting because that becomes hard for users to work with. But it all works like that. You can add new items below whatever happens to be selected. I don't think I have dragging working. Yeah, dragging is working here. Same sort of thing. And the alternate row highlighting is also implemented the same way. Let's just take a look at some of that code. I didn't implement as many event handlers here because most of the stuff is shown on the standard ListBox one. But the expand row, well, let's start with the open. So you can see here, the first thing you'll notice that's different is you're actually adding a folder on a hierarchical ListBox. You want to use the add folder method because that's what will give you the little triangle that allows you to expand the item. So you add it using a folder. And you'll see I'm using the row tag to indicate the indent level. And this is used as stuff gets added later on using those buttons. So the things are added to the right levels within the list box. And that's why I said you often are going to want to, store information so that you can build up things the way you want. And then when you expand a row, this is called when you essentially expand something that's been added as a folder. It tells you which row that was clicked. And then you can do whatever you want. So here I'm just, automatically adding a bunch of children to it, 6 children. And those are just added using the add row method. And then the level is also assigned back to the row tag so that we have it. And then if I go back to the 2 buttons that let you add new items, you can see that it's checking the indent level so that it can use the insert method and specify the indent level so that it shows up at the right spot in the list. And then we save the indent level again. And yeah, and if nothing is selected, we just add the new folder right at the top level. And a similar thing is done for adding a new item, except that you're adding an item rather than, or a row rather than a folder. So the code just uses the insert row method. But you can see the trick here is to save that indent level because you need it. And you want to make sure you have it so that you can maintain your indent structure appropriately. I believe the examples included with Xojo already come with, and it's not necessarily in the list in the desktop controls folder. I think it's in the files section. So if I go, yeah, maybe in here. Yeah, the file browser. This is another example that can show you how you might use hierarchical ListBox. So you can, I might not have been smart to click my backup drive. I just heard it spin up when I did that. There we go. Yeah, this is my Time Machine backup drive. So you can see it's just, going through the folder hierarchy and creating, the list as you navigate through your folders and showing you the files and whatnot. So that also shows you how you can use a hierarchical ListBox. All right. I got a couple questions here. Let me see. Is it possible to drag one column to another column? That's a good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. You can resize the columns. I don't think so, but who has asked that one? That was from Trisha. I don't know. I'll have to dig into that a little bit more. So shoot me an email to remind me. But I'm thinking no. but it's always possible I'm wrong, so I could be wrong about that. And just a comment here from Mike that noted that in one of his apps he created a pop-up menu that looks very similar to the one here in this demo. And as far as users are concerned, it is a pop-up menu because it works exactly the same. So you can go a long way with faking things here. I mean, you can actually draw a button, that's something that looks like a button, and handle the individual clicked events that you get on the list box to change the highlighting of the button so it looks like it's actually being pressed or whatnot. So you can do some pretty clever stuff in here, and people have. So you definitely want to play around with this example and see some of the things. Now let's look at, actually I think I have them open already, yes. One question that was asked on the forum, and this one is fairly simple, but I just want to point it out, is how to deal with column width so that you can have your list box scroll. The other example fit everything on the screen, which was great. But let's say I want to add, I don't know, say let's start with 25 columns. And you can see here, they don't all fit. And I mean, they're all squished in here, so I don't have to scroll the thing, but that's not terribly useful. But if I hit the fix width button, I now get my horizontal scroll bar. All the columns are the same width, and I can just scroll through them all. And sometimes this makes more sense. And the question is, well, how do you enable that? Well, the trick is pretty simple. You just actually have to say what the column widths are. So I'll just briefly, the fill button doesn't have any code here that matters, I don't think. It's just looping through and adding a bunch of data. But the fix width button is creating a string here and then setting the column width property of the string. And I should put a comment in here, but essentially the string is looking like something like this, with an entry for however many columns there are. And it's saying, all right, each column is 200, I don't want to say pixels, but that's usually the most common term. Points is becoming more and more used for retina displays and whatnot, but it's 200 is how wide it is. And this is saying every column is exactly 200. You don't have to make them the same, of course. You can have, be any width you want. And the other way that columns can be specified is you can do percents. So you could say, all right, I want the first column to have 50% of the available width for the list box, and the next two columns to share the width. So you can do stuff like that. You can mix and match them. So I want the first one to be 50%. I want the rest of them to all be fixed at 100. And you can type all these things in. You can create them in code doing it like I'm doing and just set the column width property. Or you can actually set the column width property right in the inspector, which is right down here. And you can just type all that in. So, if the column count is fixed and you always know it's the same number and you have, a specific layout that you want to achieve, then yeah, it would make sense to specify the widths right in here. But if you don't know the column count and that varies, then you're going to have to adjust your widths in code, of course. But that's how you adjust the widths. Just use the column width property. It's pretty easy and straightforward. The only hard part is actually building up a comma to limited string. All right, and let's see this last example here. Got just a simple two-column list box. You can see as I'm clicking around, only the cell that I've selected is highlighted, and it's highlighted in this really ugly green. And how's it doing that? Normally you'd get a blue bar all the way across the whole cell, which may not be what you want, or all the way across the whole row, which may not be what you want. So let's see here. There's two event handles we're using, cell click and the background paint. And cell click is what tells us, whenever you click around inside a list box, this event handler is called, telling you where you clicked. And it tells you the row you clicked on, and tells you the column you clicked on. It also tells you the X and Y coordinates, just in case it matters for what you're drawing or what you're doing. And it may very well matter if you were drawing graphics on there, say you were drawing a button and you wanted to pretend like it was a button. Having the X and Y values might matter so that you know if you clicked exactly in the button you drew or if there's a specific thing you want to do if they click on a certain part of the cell. So all that information is very useful. And what this is doing is it's saving the row and column that were selected. And then it's saying, all right, let's invalidate the cell that was selected. And this allows the background paint event handler for the cell to be called, where we can instead draw what we want. So in the background paint event handler, and you'll notice it's the same event handler we used in the other example to do the alternate row highlighting. We're checking if the row and the column are the ones that we saved. So that means, are these the ones that the user had clicked on previously? Because the paint event could get called for more than just the row you're dealing with. The paint event can get called, just if your window has to redraw itself for some reason or any wide variety of reasons. It's kind of out of your control. So you want to make sure that you're actually attempting to paint the column you expect to paint. That's why we're checking these values here to make sure we're painting the column that was actually clicked. And then, I just chose, full green. I didn't get too crazy there. And then I'm just filling a rectangle with the entire area behind the scenes. And then here's the important line, is returning true. Let's just comment that out. Oh, I guess it wasn't so important. It's always funny when I go to show something that doesn't work like I expect. I really expect, oh, it's probably because I didn't have the list index. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Because list index isn't getting, if list index was getting a value set, then the row would get highlighted in the blue, but because I'm not doing that, the returning true here is kind of optional. Still a good idea though. You never know when you might end up actually using list index to set a specific row, and you don't want that row highlight to come back. So this is how, and if you wanted to completely override the entire, highlight, you wanted both these rows to be highlighted, then you could just, tweak this so it's not checking both of them. You would just want to check the row, I guess. And then now you've got the entire row being highlighted in green. And, you can do what you want there. All right, what are we looking here? Oh, not bad. Got a few questions I'm going to move over to. All right, David notes that in the last couple of weeks, he wrote some code that automatically resizes columns to fit the longest string in each column. Oh, that's pretty cool. There's not a ton of white space, but no cutoff text. And that's a great use of adjusting everything. If we go back to the other example here. Again, my fixed example here, well, you can see right here, the text is cut off. I could resize that. And I could have probably tweaked the column list a little better so that these all fit nicely. But particularly if you're pulling data from a database, you're not going to know how wide the data is. So you'll notice that by default, you do get for free the little ellipses that show if there's more data than what can appear in the cell. But you may want to just adjust your column headings to make sure that it's wide enough to show the data you just say pulled from a database. So you can do that by checking the data ahead of time and its width, and then going back and adjusting your columns accordingly. So that sounds like some really useful code, David. And Tricia is also pointing out that you can use 1 star on column widths to adjust things. And yeah, I definitely go to the language reference to see all the different ways that you can specify column widths. So you can even I think you can even put some mathematical values in there, and you can combine things lots of different ways. So you can get pretty creative with the column widths. I don't know that I've ever needed to do some of the really crazy stuff you can do there, but you never know when you might need to. So it's good to know what it is fully capable of. And yeah, and that brings up a follow-up point she brought up is that a common technique that you see people often do, and may not always be necessary, is they make a column that has a 0 width, and they use that to store kind of hidden information that the user doesn't necessarily need to see, but they need for their code behind the scenes. And that was necessary many years ago, back when Xojo was known as Real Basic, and it didn't have a lot of these additional properties. But with the new properties for the tags, so the row tag and the cell tags, you don't need hidden columns as often as you did in the past, because you now have hidden data you can associate with every cell, and it's a variant. So you can, assign anything you want to it. You can even have your own class that's responsible for tracking all kinds of information for a cell and assign that to the cell tag for each individual cell of the list box. So using those tag values give you a great way to just store all kinds of related information in your list box that will never accidentally get shown to the user. So cell tag and row tag are the ones to check out that probably are going to prove useful. And let's see here, I got a note from Mike that's noting also cell text help, which is a property, and I didn't specify any cell text help on this example, but that gives you the tooltips when the mouse cursor is over a specific cell. And he's noting that he used that to display when there's columns that aren't wide enough to show all the data, he has it set up so the cell text help will show the text when the mouse is over it. And I'm sure you've seen stuff like that. It's like when you hover over this, you get something like this. Now, this isn't actually a list box, but it would look like this. And it could display additional information about what the user just hovered over. It could show more of the information if it didn't all fit in the cell or on the screen. You can do whatever you want. It's a lot of stuff that's available there. And just to prove that point, I'm going to go back to the language reference here, and let's just bring up the list box page, which is quite lengthy and is on my to-do list to rework quite a bit. As you can see, just looking at the scroll bar, this is a long page. I bet if I find the wiki stats on this, this is probably the longest page in the wiki. So I do need to break this up more and probably review some of the examples. I bet a few of them are more than a little dated at this point and could use some additional clarification. But you can see there's a lot of event handlers on the list box. And it's just, we probably hit maybe half of these. So a lot of stuff here. You definitely want to check them out when you're working with list boxes. Is probably a way to do what you think it is you need to do. Looks like there's even more properties. Look, I can't even fit them on this screen. There's so many properties. And there's the cell. Where's the cell help tag? Is that down here? Is that a method? Yeah, it's down here. And just all kinds of stuff. Controlling how it looks, the size of it. Pretty much whatever you can think of is going to be in here. And then, of course, the methods that are used to add information to the list box, remove information from the list box. One thing that I want to point out is there is even a method on here called row picture. And this can be used to add a picture to the list box, but it only adds the picture to the leftmost side of the list box. And for most purposes, this probably isn't good enough for what you're trying to do. It's just going to show the picture on the left-hand side, and if you happen to have, and it'll just indent the first column, so the picture will be kind of not even a real column. It'll just be on the left-hand side. And if you have rows that don't have a row picture assigned, you end up with this jagged look because the first column is indented for the rows that have the picture, but it's not indented for the rows that don't have a picture. So then you have to make sure you assign a picture. You have to make sure the pictures are all the same widths. So row picture is pretty handy and quick and easy to use. You just do row picture, row equals picture, but it's often not flexible enough for what most people use. So if you've tried row picture and it didn't work out right, take a look again at the event handlers, particularly the background paint ones, so you can just draw whatever you want in the cell and then have full control. All right, there's a couple other questions here. Is it possible to animate changing the column widths? Well, I suppose it's possible if you used a timer and tweak the column width in increments. That might provide some sort of animation effect. I can't say I've actually tried that, but that would be something interesting to play around with. Let's see, Tricia has a question about, can you set the column to 0% in web list box? Trisha's the one asking me questions I don't know the answers to today. I don't know. I haven't dug around in Web ListBox enough recently to know if that's working or not. So I don't know. That would be the thing to try and see if that works. I do not know. And yes, I think Mike was correcting himself to say he used cell help tag. I think I might have auto-corrected for him when I read the question. I don't remember now. But what Mike was using was the cell help tag event handler to display this text for the string. All right, checking the timer. All right, well, that's coming in on our hour. So I will make, as always, these webinars are recorded. I will make these 3 projects available along with the webinar recording, so you'll be able to pull these down. And I think the main ListBox example you can also get from the wiki now. If I can find the link, maybe you can get it from the wiki. Yeah, right here. So in the example project section, this link will take you to the latest examples, which include several that are not in R3 at this point. So you might want to go ahead and grab that and pull that down, find this one, play around with it, come up with some cool stuff, things to show off on the forum, whatnot. And I want to go back to my webinar tab and let's see, point out what we're doing next week. So next week is the Introduction to Xojo webinar. All of you here, I'm sure, are absolute experts at this point. So I might see fewer of you at that one. This is mostly for people that have just recently picked up or are trying out Xojo to get a feel for it. But by all means, pop in and you can offer tips or who knows what. And of course, registration is open on the next ones right up through the middle of October. The threading one is starting to get pretty full. So if you're interested in that, you want to make sure you've reserved your spot. And again, if you have other topics you want to see webinars on, by all means, let me know. I have a few in my queue, and this will probably be updated in the next week or two with the schedule going through November, I suspect. So I want to thank everyone for attending. And if you haven't already, grab Release 3. And I do want to point out one last thing, no, 2 last things that I need to point out before we leave here. One is I bet I have a poll that I need to run. So I'm going to do that. If those of you still here could fill out the poll. And then the other thing, if I can find it on bring that up while you guys are all doing the poll. All right, and the other thing is that we also, in addition to releasing or shipping Release 3 today, we also now have opened up registration for the Xojo Developer Conference in 2013. And you can get to that here at the xojo.com/xdc. And we're in Las Vegas next year, which will be exciting. I've never been out there, so I'm looking forward to it. But you can register now. Click more to find out about the hotel, I guess. And but you'll definitely want to be there. We're going to have a ton of people. I think we've already gotten a bunch of registrations in today, and registration just opened today. And Las Vegas is always a prime destination that people love to visit. So you might even want to show up a few days early or leave a few days late from the conference and hang out and check it out. So I guess that's it. Thanks everyone for attending this week, and we'll see some of you next week. Have a great rest of your day.